when you first are writing your first book, I mean, you're kind of swimming in the ocean in the dark out there with no land in sight, and no life preserver. You're just kind of making it up as you go along and seeing if this is going to work or not.
Hello and welcome back to The Perch from the Wyoming Tribune-Eagle. I'm Noah Zahn, your local government reporter here. I'm back this week after a trip out to New York City last week, and this week we're bringing you a conversation that our arts and entertainment reporter Taylor Staples had with Wyoming author Craig Johnson about his newest book coming out next week. That's who you heard at the start of the show. The new book is called Return to Cinder, and it's the 28th story in the series featuring stories of Sheriff Walt Longmire set in the fictional Absaroka County in Wyoming. In the interview, Johnson shared how he develops his stories by immersing himself in Wyoming's history and its culture, and how he never falls out of love with continuing to get to know and develop his characters. Here's that conversation now.
I read the description. I read the first few pages. I have the book on NetGalley. Super exciting.
Oh my.
Coming out in a month. So
You've read a more finished copy than I have.
Are you serious? That's crazy.
Yeah, no, they don't get us like the finished book until of course. Then I don't know. I guess if it's the galley, I'm not sure if that's the most recent.
That is fair.
Through, with the editing or not. I don't know. Anyway, it's.
Oh my God.
It was a fun book to write.
Yes.
Just simply because I always enjoy writing things that will resonate, obviously,
totally.
with Wyoming natives like that, that will get, and that are believable, that this is a believable story like that. And so when I read that, story, just about all of the books that I write are based off of some newspaper article at some point or another. I think I've made the statement that I don't want to ever have Walt on a cruise ship, and I don't want to ever have Walt chasing Al Qaeda in Crook County or something like that. I want him dealing with the things that we deal with here in Wyoming.
Totally.
The postal routes. Knowing that that we have like the longest postal routes in the entire country. That just was just too much of an opportunity, because as soon as I heard about that woman that drove almost 300 miles a day, I was
right.
If she went missing, where would you look for her? And
right.
And then then I'm always looking for the opportunity to kind of stretch Walt's jurisdiction, outside of Absaroka County, just simply because how many people can you kill in Absaroka County, the least populated county in Wyoming, before it's getting stupid, and so he gets called in on this one by the postal inspector, who's got this missing mail carrier, and. It was a fun one, and it's of course another situation where Walt kind of has to go undercover.
Totally,
and he's not very good at it, because he's 6'5" and weighs 257 pounds, and so it's not like he doesn't, stand out a little bit.
Oh, that's so fun! I definitely want to dive into that aspect where you play with him being undercover, but him not being super good at it, because I think that's super interesting kind of characterization you added to him. So
for me, one of the biggest problems with a lot of crime fiction is the characters are on borderline, comic book characters, where they're just so capable, so perfect, so
right.
And I just, that just isn't, the human beings that I know. We all have our shortcomings like that, and so, and of course the shortcomings lead to kind of interesting situations as far as the humor in the books is concerned. And that's a kind of another aspect to the books that I, feel very strongly about. I think that, anybody who's ever had a tough job, anybody who's ever, dealt, in law enforcement or medical field or, anything, it doesn't matter.
Right.
All jobs have a certain amount of, capacity for, tension involved. And one of the ways that you get through that type of thing is by having a sense of humor. And, for me, that, that's really important for the books to be funny. There's
yes.
a humorous aspect to them too.
Well, I was going to go off of that, and you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. I love that you pull inspiration from news articles, because I think that's such a good point. It starts with just being inquisitive, honestly, and just reading stuff like that and being but what if ... And then I feel that's where the inspiration flows. But how do you...
Absolutely.
Yes. How do you feel the setting specifically of Wyoming has helped guide the issues in your book so far?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to admit, look at that. One part of Wyoming is nothing at all like the other parts of Wyoming, which is really kind of great. I mean, the geographic area that we encompass, and then the topography, the range, that's involved, with the state of Wyoming, really is an advantage, whenever you're writing about it. And that area down there in the Red Desert's always been, really of interest, to me, like that, and I travel around all over the state, I'm always, picking up little bits and pieces, from different places and thinking, okay, well, if you were to do one here, what would you do it and how would you do it, like that, and I mean, what is it? It's like the largest living sand dune, in the lower 48, for goodness sake, and just an amazing place, a really amazing place. And then, even more, it's doing even more research on it, but it makes for a different environment for each book, which I think is, important. I think you can kind of get, stuck in a rut, sometimes if you're just writing about the same place, the same time, the same characters and all of that over and over and over again. I mean, obviously there are certain things that people come to a series of books for, that, might be the characters, that they like, the place, the familiarity, of, a series and all of that. But I think you also have to mix it up a little bit and try and do things a little bit different each time.
100%. Yeah.
I think that's kind of important.
Yeah.
It's the landscape itself, speaks to such a great extent, within each of the books. I mean, one of my favorite quotes about writing was actually from a Chicago newspaper man by the name of Studs Terkel, who said, nothing ever happened nowhere. You got to be very specific about those type of things. And then that's a certain challenge, too, to treat those places, with an honesty and a reality.
Totally.
Because you know what? There are about 500,000 experts on living in Wyoming. So, if you get something wrong, they should be able to, jump on your website and hit your contact button and tell you what they think you got wrong. So...
No, that's so fair. I mean, the state is so big that there's no shortage of places just in Wyoming, which I think is a really fair point. But I wanted to get to your point about the rut. So you have been writing almost a book a year since 2004, with the exception of 1 or 2 years. So how do you...
No, it's been one novel per year, and then 3 novellas and a collection of short stories.
That is insane.
I've been out a book every year for the last 21 years. Yeah.
How do you avoid the rut then? And what are specific things you do in each book to kind of, like you said, switch it up? Do you add new characters? Always a new place? Yeah, all of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. All of the above. And all the things you just mentioned, like that. But, yeah, I mean, and that's the big trick. Whenever I first started, I was, new at the game, like that, and figured, okay, well, this is the starting point, geographically and chronologically, and so now I have to just move forward. And, and everybody always tells you when you start out, everybody always has a lot of rules for you when you're starting out. And, one of the, a lot of the mystery authors said, well, whatever you do, you can't change location. You have to make sure that it stays right there where you started. And I'm like, I don't know if that, as soon as somebody gives me a rule, I'm always thinking, how can I break that? And, the third book, the majority of it takes place in Philadelphia, for goodness sake.
Oh,
and the
interesting.
Fourth book, takes place, when Walt's a homicide investigator, for the Marine Corps in Vietnam in 1968. So not only did I break the rules of going to a different geographic location, but also a different time frame. I mean, last year's book, First Frost, takes place, the majority of it, in 1964, when Walt and Henry graduate from college and lose their deferment, and they're going to be sent off to Vietnam. And so,
right.
And then Tooth and Claw, the little novella that I did, just before the holidays in November, that one takes place during Walt's, experiences, working security for the oil rigs up in on the North Slope of Alaska in the early 1970s. And so what I've discovered is that you can change things around a little bit. You can move on, and do things chronologically different, topographically different, geographically different, and this one does. I mean, it's down, in Rock Springs, in the Red Desert area, And I think, one of the big things that, when you love a place and you would, really, admire a place, one of the things that it requires from you in the writing is an honesty.
Totally.
Like I was saying before about the 500,000 people that are experts on Wyoming. I mean, when I have distances to go from one place to another, I have to treat that honestly. If it's going to take 6 hours to drive that, I have to make it be known, within the book that it's a 6-hour drive
Right.
on I-80, for Walt to get from over in Rock Springs over to to Cheyenne.
Yeah.
And so, and then what that experience is like, and discuss a little bit of the history of those places. I stumbled onto a little book called the Snow Chi Men Trail, which was the history of I-80. And so I included a lot of the information from that, in this book that's coming up. And so, I mean, it's just an opportunity to kind of enlighten people, about the history, and the qualities of the state that maybe they don't know.
I love that.
Not everybody who reads my books is from Wyoming. I mean, the books have been translated into a couple of dozen languages around the world. And, an awful lot of people, came to it, from the television show Longmire. And so it's important to understand, that you have to be honest, because they're, like I said, experts on Wyoming, but you also want to make it, insightful and, slightly educational, and knowledgeable, that for the people who don't live here.
Totally.
And to give them an honest appraisal of, what the place is like and what the people are like. And,
yeah.
And all of that.
I also feel like that contributes to the world building a lot too, treating the reader like they haven't been to Wyoming before and really setting the scene is, I think, what really makes it stand out.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're going to have to walk that tightrope, of providing that information, but also, being at least knowledgeable of knowing that, after writing 20
totally.
years of books, there are going to be certain people that have read all 20 of those books, and they really don't want to hear that same stuff
100%.
encapsulated. So then you got to sit down and you got to find a new way to say the things that you want to get across to the reader without this being repetitious. So, but thank goodness, hopefully, I've succeeded in that to a certain extent, and it certainly is wonderful to see the response, of people who not only watch the TV show but also read the books.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, the show got 6 or so seasons, right? That's phenomenal.
Yeah. We went full 6 seasons, and 3 of them on A&E, and then 3 on Netflix, and then we're still doing streaming syndication, and then we'll wait to see what happens when Warner Brothers, because we're finally divested ourselves from Netflix, which kind of had a sweetheart deal for the TV show, and now we're just waiting to see what Warner Brothers is going to do. And, every year, with Longmire Days that we have up here in Buffalo, we have thousands of people that show up that want to know, are there going to be more? And I'm always telling them, well, we're just waiting to see what Warner Brothers is going to do. But in the meantime, there are these books,
Right. Keep yourself occupied. Totally. So I'd love to know, all of the books you've written, all of the things you've learned over the year, how do you feel like your writing has grown since the first Longmire book?
Oh my gosh! The first thing that you get is a certain amount of confidence. When you first are writing your first book, you're kind of swimming in the ocean in the dark out there with no land in sight, and no life preserver. You're just kind of making it up as you go along and seeing if this is going to work or not. You're just doing it and hoping that maybe you'll get picked up by an agent, maybe you'll get picked up by a publisher and all of that. I think it's I can't remember what it is, something like 86% of the people in the country want to write a book. 5% actually started. 3% finish. And only 1% get them published. So the odds are, so great against you. I don't know. You might as well want to be an astronaut because your odds are going to be better, for goodness sake, But yeah, I think that as you go along, you start picking up a little bit of confidence. You start getting a little bit more secure and at ease, with the idea of telling stories on the page. And you also get a sense of the characters and the place, and the relationships, and the arc of those characters. Which is very different, in a long-running series. To just sit down and write a book, that's one thing. But that's a standalone, that and it gives you a certain amount of freedom.
Yeah.
To start, all over from the drawing board, Whereas whenever you're running a long-term series like that, there are rules like that, and there are things that you have to take into consideration, and an awful lot of information that you have to, retain, like in making sure that the chronology and the continuity like of that series, remains, as it should. You can't, suddenly decide the character's 20 years younger than when you started.
Totally.
It just doesn't work that way, and the readers might get annoyed with that type of thing, like it, and so you have to kind of be honest. You have to play it up honest, like and stay with it, year after year. Which is, I don't know, for me, kind of a joy, because I have to laugh, because there are an awful lot of people who will ask me, they'll say, well, how do you keep it straight? I mean, do you have like one of those big like bulletin boards, in your writing room, with the photographs, and pieces of yarn going from one spot to the next? I mean, it makes it sound like you're a serial killer or something. And it's like, well, no, I spend like about 8 hours a day with these characters. So in all honesty, I may be spending more time with these characters than I am with my family.
That's crazy.
So I better be able to retain that stuff, or else something's wrong. So.
Okay, that's a really good point. That's a good point. Like, this is your life. Like, these characters inside and out. Yeah, it's such a neat thing. Speaking of,
well, and it's an enjoyable thing to do.
Yes,
I like to think that the reason why people continue to read the books like that, or the same reason why it is I enjoy going back and writing the books.
Yeah,
I mean, there are a lot of different reasons like that, but one is that Walt is good company. He's just good company like that. I mean, he's all of the things that I guess the way I've described him is if my truck slides off the road in January into a snowdrift on I-25, that's the set of headlights I want coming up behind me. I want Walt Longmire in that truck.
I love that.
Because I think that there's a kindness to him, an intelligence to him, a doggedness, to him, a loyalty to him, and a strong moral code like that he lives by, like that, and and all those things like that I see a lot, in a lot of people who work law enforcement, here in Wyoming and all over the world, like that. They make a lot of sacrifices in their lives for the common good, like that, and so. To me, that's kind of important. I mean, every once in a while, somebody will ask me. They'll say, well, like Arthur Conan Doyle, do you get tired of your character and ever think about throwing him off of a, like Sherlock, like he did with Sherlock Holmes, and throwing him off a cliff, And I'm like, well, first of all, Walt's not a sociopathic coke addict, like it, and so that makes it a little bit easier. Like, he's actually a really nice guy, like that, and I kind of enjoy, spending time with him, like it, and seeing what he's up to and what he's involved with, and to me, that's the enjoyable factor of it. If he wasn't good company, I don't think I would return like that. But for 21 years, I've plumbed the depths, of who Walt Longmire is, and I've covered some ground, but I certainly haven't covered all of it. Like that, there's still an awful lot there.
There's still so much to explore. I think it can be just as fun to write a protagonist like that as much as it can be fun to write like a very evil antagonist too. So, yeah,
absolutely. It's always a mark of wonder to me, like that, because you do a lot of like auctions, for charitable organizations, for libraries. A lot of libraries, they'll have an auction for a character or something. It's always amazing to me, like that people want to be the bad guy. They always, make me a killer, make me a bad guy. Like, is there something going on in your life that we don't know about?
Right, right. That's so funny. Well, speaking of Walt, I mean, that's kind of what I was going to ask, like his favorite qualities that he has that you've kind of put into him. But I'm also just curious, like, did you pull from people in your life to put into Walt? Is that how you kind of came up with him?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been quoted numerous times. One of my favorite quotes, when writing is from Wallace Stegner, the famed writing teacher from Stanford University, who had, such luminaries as Ken Kesey and Larry McMurtry as students. And one of the statements that he made was, the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off anybody alive or dead.
Yeah.
That's what you do. Like, it is go find interesting people.
Yes.
And put them together to make, the characters that you need. An awful lot of the time, it might not be somebody as a whole like that, but it will be bits and pieces. Kind of a Dr. Frankenstein kind of thing, where you take different bits and pieces like that to put these kind of characters together. Yeah. And that's one of the joys of doing what it is that that we do. as writers, like that you have that kind of freedom, like that to create, this landscape and these characters, like and these relationships, these histories, and all of these things, like it, and it's like painting or composing music or things like that, and I don't know. I mean, it's very addictive too. I mean, you spend like I said, 8 hours a day doing this stuff like that. I write like 6 days a week and then cheat on Sundays, like it, and so it must be something that I enjoy doing, because I wouldn't do it, that consistently if it wasn't an enjoyable, endeavor like that. And for me it is like I've been doing it now for like more than 20 years like that, and I can't imagine having a real job, to be honest with you. Like this is nothing at all like a real job. Like it's the old statement, what is it, that if you enjoy what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yes.
And I haven't worked a day in my life in 20 years. So
I love that.
I guess I'm pretty lucky.
I love that. Yes. And you get break days occasionally, which is so important, even if you do love your job. So that's good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel like Sheriff Longmire has grown over the course of the 21 books you've been with him?
Oh, that's actually pretty easy, like because when we first meet Walt Longmire in the cold dish, his wife has died most recently. He's got this kind of estranged, kind of relationship with his daughter, who's a lawyer in Philadelphia. He's at that point in his life where I think a lot of us are, where we think, and wonder, if we're really doing what it is that we should be doing with our lives. He's kind of having a little bit of a crisis of conscience. And then this mystery, presents itself, like as maybe the most, imposing mystery certainly that he's had up until this point in time. Like, and it kind of like saves his life. It kind of pulls him back.
Yeah.
And what he learns is that, what he does is in many ways who he is. And that he's actually, as it turns out, very good at what he does. I mean, Walt Longmire is a world-class detective. He's every bit as good as Sherlock Holmes or Mrs. Marple or, Hercule Poirot, like that, or any of the other, famed, world-famous, investigators. He's very, very good at what he does. He just happens to live in the least populated county in the least populated state. So, sometimes he has to stretch his jurisdictional limits, like to maybe go find a case that's, worthy of him, like that. And so, but he cares. Like that's the other thing is that he actually cares about the people in his county. One of the things whenever I'm doing interviews or ride-alongs with a lot of local sheriffs, I mean, talk about experts. I mean, we've got 23 experts in here in Wyoming about Wyoming sheriffing. Like, and if I get something wrong, they also are very happy to like write me an email and call me up on the phone and tell me, hey, I think you got this wrong. Yes. And so it's kind of important like that, because one of the things that I would hear them say over and over again was my people, my people, my people. I mean, there's a genuine feeling of connection, I think, with a sheriff, in his community, just simply because the people that are in this county have given that individual one of the most wonderful, treasured things that they have, their vote. And so they feel connected, to them. And so people who would never in a million years walk into a police department, will walk right into a sheriff's office and say, hey, this guy's building a fence on my property, across the property line. You need to come down here like that and stop him, And so it kind of makes for a more of a community kind of policing. For Walt, like than it is, just driving around in a pair of chrome sunglasses.
Yes. I love that you did ride-alongs to kind of like get that perspective. That's so interesting. And also, I'm sure that gave you a lot of insight as well. And like,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like and it's, and for that character, like that, I mean, it's, it's the best form of law enforcement, community law enforcement.
Yes.
Like they discovered, 20, 30 years ago, like that you have to be involved with the community, like that, because you can stop a lot of crime before it ever gets to the point where you have to intercede.
Yeah.
And so, that kind of is like what Walt's all about, being out there, being known, being seen. They, it just makes for a situation, I think, where Walt, is a part of that community, and that gives me more of an opportunity to display that, like that, and bring it across what life is like here in Wyoming.
Yes. So obviously, Sheriff Longmire inside and out. I'm curious about the antagonists' minds that you kind of delve into each book. So this book is are the outlaws, right? So when Longmire
Yeah.
kind of goes on this journey, he runs into these outlaws, and thus, yeah.
Yeah, it's well. I mean, there's the guideline that I have for that is the Northern Cheyenne have a really marvelous proverb about that, which is you judge a man by the strength of his enemies,
Yes.
and that's kind of the way I approach Walt. I kind of look at him as like, okay, he's one tough customer. Like, and so if he's going to go up against some people, they're going to have to be, pretty tough themselves, and dangerous, like to make, for a situation that makes the book worth reading. I mean, I don't want to make cardboard characters that Walt can just walk over and knock down. Like, I want to make it difficult for him. I mean, you've really got to get to a certain point, I think, when you're writing these type of books, where every book you write, there's got to be that one moment in the book where you go, I don't know if he's going to make it or not. And so, you have to be open to that idea that every book might be the last one, or else you're not really playing fair, with the characters. And so, for me, that's important. And then the other part is like looking at the characters and trying to see them as, real characters and having the proper motivations for doing what it is that they do. I mean, to believe, okay, is this believable? Would this character do this, this way? And would they really go this far to accomplish this? Things like that. I think that give a credibility to the antagonists. And they're just as important as any of the others. As Tony Hillerman once said, to me, he said, you know what? You gotta sit in all the chairs. You can't just sit in the one chair. So you have to really be able to, understand and believe, that these characters would do what they would do, no matter how horrible they may be.
Oh, that's so interesting. I love that. And then that kind of guides me into, specifically with this book, what do you feel was the biggest hump to get over for you?
Oh, well, I mean, the physicality of it in the latter part of the book, it is really tough. I mean, this is a very, very difficult physical situation that Walt finds himself in. And so there are, and he's not a spring chicken. Walt is not 26 years old. I mean, Walt's getting a little older like that. And so, some of these difficulties, even as tough as he is, kind of push him to his physical limits.
Yes.
In many ways. And then, there's always going to be a situation involved with a missing persons case like that where, if you're in a missing persons case like that, they have the perfect legal right to tell you to go away. If you find them, even if somebody's looking for them, it's basically the legalities that are involved, basically say, if you find them and they tell you to go away, then the only thing you can do is tell the people that are looking for them that they are alive and safe.
Right. I mean, he's not superhuman.
You can't tell them. Yeah, you can't tell them where they are. You can't tell them what they're doing. You can't tell them anything.
Right.
If somebody sends you out to go in a missing persons case, and you finally find them like that, you're not allowed to give any of that information back. The only thing you can say is like they're alive and well. And that's it.
Totally.
That kind of puts your protagonist in a kind of a difficult situation like that because you've got these people that are desperate to try and find this person like that and find out where they are, what's going on, and all of this, and to see if they're safe like that. And then they don't get to judge because you don't get to give them the details of that person's life after you find them. And that's kind of a unique situation for Walt because he he doesn't get involved with a lot of missing persons cases and one of the reasons he gets involved with this one is because it's a family member who's the postal inspector like that who ropes him into this situation like that. And it's kind of important to play it real and not have Walt break the law or do something that he's not allowed to do.
Yes. Oh my gosh. My last question for you is, so where is Longmire headed next? Are you like reading up on articles and just kind of picking your brain right now, or do you kind of have an idea?
Oh yeah, no, I'm actually on chapter 12 of the one.
Oh my gosh! Now.
Okay. So I'm moving right along and it's interesting because I mean the background for it of course is another one of my favorite little areas, which is the Crazy Woman Canyon up here in the Bighorns which is I consider to be one of the most beautiful places in the world but it also got touched by those fires that we had most recently.
Yes.
So you have to have something that's going to deal, obviously, with the environment a little bit as far as like the fires are concerned, and what we're dealing with, here in, the summers in Wyoming, where there's maybe not quite as much moisture as we'd hope for, which is why it is at the beginning of the conversation we were talking about moisture. And that's what we do in Wyoming, is talk about moisture. So, but there's that, and then, of course, it was also time for a real kind of red meat mystery novel, which had a number of characters that were suspects that were really close to home for Walt, so he could deal with things right there in Absaroka County, and then you take all of those different things and then also work in a little bit of like a literary aspect to the books too, like that. I always enjoyed doing that. I think it was the 7th book in the series, Hell is Empty, where I did a little bit of a retelling of Dante's Inferno.
Oh, cool.
Walt, goes up into the Bighorn Mountains, to bring a woman back that's been abducted. And and for me, there's always the fun part of dropping in these kind of literary allusions like that. And so that book's actually called The Brothers McKay, which is a little bit of a takeoff of The Brothers Karamazov. So it's my chance to kind of delve into a little bit of Dostoevsky while I'm writing this book too. And I guess that was for me a little bit of an eye opener that I probably should have known, was that the people that are going to read my books, they may have read other books too. And so it's kind of fun for them, because Walt actually has, a literary background. He's a very well-read, sheriff. And so for the people to sit down who read books and read about a sheriff that reads books, it's kind of a connection that they can make. That
relate to him more,
that he's one of them, yeah.
That was Taylor Staples with Wyoming author Craig Johnson. His newest book in the Longmire series releases Tuesday. Now, here's Taylor again to bring you a quick roundup of some of the events happening in Cheyenne and Laramie County this week.
Today, May 23rd, the library is hosting a dementia caregiver support group from 2 to 3 p.m. Then at the Lincoln, the CW and 20 Hands High Band is performing with Ben Garcia at 8 p.m. Then, on Saturday, May 24th, the community can participate in a Dog Jog 5K, an event that will benefit the Cheyenne Animal Shelter and allow people to run or jog a 5K with their furry friend. The race will take place from 8 to 10 a.m. starting in Lions Park. Also, a paint and sip event will take place at the Cats and Coffee Connections Cat Cafe from 5 to 7 p.m. On Sunday, May 25th, A Taste of Ireland is coming to the Cheyenne Civic Center at 3:30 p.m. And the Cheyenne Youth Short Film Festival will take place at the historic Atlas Theater at 6 p.m. Since Monday is Memorial Day, there are no events currently scheduled on our calendar right now. On Tuesday, May 27th, people can go to Cats and Coffee Connections to enjoy a vinyl record painting night from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Then, adults can enjoy Tuesday night book club at the library with local Wyoming book, The Pumpkin Eater by Sam Dawson from 6 to 7:30 p.m. On Wednesday, May 28th, adults can meet at the library for a book swap anytime from 3 to 7:30 p.m. Also, a speed friending event for book lovers will take place at the library from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And finally, on Thursday, May 29th, the Cheyenne Creativity Center has a community Jenga project event from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And the library is hosting a Pet 101 course from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., as well as a true crime book club from 6 to 7:30 p.m. For more events, head to wyomingnews.com.
And before we wrap up today, here's a recap of some of our top stories and headlines from the past week. Multiple doctors have left Cheyenne Regional Medical Center after a vote of no confidence in CEO Tim Thornell was cast in December by a group of hospital providers. The doctors have spoken out against the hospital administration, saying it does not address unethical concerns and staffing issues. The hospital's Board of Trustees conducted an investigation into the hospital's administration and staff and have unanimously said they continue to support the CEO. An alleged health insurance fraud scheme has been taking advantage of people with drug addiction, and it recently started happening in Wyoming, according to at least one health insurance company. The Wyoming Department of Insurance posted a public service announcement this month warning people to be on the lookout for body brokers and health insurance scams. The House Committee on Energy and Commerce passed a reconciliation bill last week with a 30 to 24 vote that proposes $715 billion in cuts to Medicaid. The Kaiser Family Foundation estimates that at least 13.7 million people across the country will become uninsured by 2034 under the proposed changes, including many in Wyoming. And finally, a woman associated with the theft of roughly $26,000 worth of coins from a guest room at the historic Plains Hotel has changed her plea from not guilty to no contest. That's all for this week's episode of The Perch. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, and be sure to check back in next Friday for more.